Does color theory make you feel like you want to take a nap? Hide? Run away.
Now, apparently, the mere mention of color theory makes me want to be a complete goofball, but in all seriousness, color theory can be a scary phrase for many of us. There's a ton of science and psychology behind color, and much of it, shockingly, is still heavily debated. There are plenty of super qualified creators who will give you the detailed lowdown on color wheels and which one is correct, color mixing charts and why they're needed, and on and on and on. But I'm not really that creator today because I just have a story to tell you. Friends, I have a story about a lovely little lemon. This lemon, years ago, taught me about the soul of color mixing. This sassy fruit opened my eyes to color and its power to blow your ever-loving mind on the page. Okay, I lied. Here's a smidge of Christie-style science before we dive into painting our lemons. That's right, friends, we're going to paint some lemons today. Many of you know I've written a few books, and in the beginning of a bunch of those books, I have what I call the Watercolor Wheel, and it is my goofy, lopsided color wheel meant to acquaint readers with the basics of color theory. But there is a dreamy secret here if you look close. And friends, I'm going to give you a free download of this baby so you can print it out and pop it up on your wall to look at whenever you feel the itch to get serious about color. Well, as serious as I would recommend on this channel, and you know how that goes. The wonderful thing about my watercolor wheel and its wonky lopsidedness is that it gives you a glimpse into how these colors mix and mingle together, side by side, across barriers, you get it. We've talked about it before, the basics of a color wheel, the RGB color wheel, that is, you've got red and green opposite, you've got orange and blue opposite, and purple and yellow opposite. Those are opposites on the color wheel. When you mix them together, what do you get? Muddy colors. And I did a whole video making sure you weren't too scared of muddy colors. I'm going to link it down below. Watch it soon. So colors opposite each other on the color wheel are also what we call complementary colors. So let me show you a little exercise called complementary washes. You made that phrase up, didn't you? Yes, I did. Okay, here's what you're gonna do, friends. Make sure that your palette is sprayed down. You want these colors to be super juicy. First up, you're gonna make a little puddle of red on the page, friends. And just be super generous with that color. You wanna get a nice wet puddle on the page. Rinse your brush, and then about an inch and a half away, make a green puddle. Friends, the red and the green that you use, the exact shade, does not matter. You could even use pink and teal, although in a very strange outcome, pink and teal typically mix to make purple, but you could still try it. Anywho, you're gonna add a little bit of clean water in between your red puddle and your green puddle. And you don't wanna completely mix in between the two. Just let gravity take over and see what happens. A little bit of swirl, a little bit of tap in between, and those two colors will start to blendy blend. We're gonna do the same thing with our yellow and our purple. Friends, our red and our yellow, and eventually our blue, our primaries, are what we're messing with here. And we're mixing into our primaries a little bit of our secondary colors, which is our green, our purple, and our orange. All right, friends, here's the blue puddle, and then you want an orange puddle. Remember to rinse your brush in between so you can start with a nice clean mix when you let the water go in between your puddles and blendy blend a little bit. There we go again, rinse and let those two colors just touch ever so slightly, a few swirls. But what you'll notice is this. By adding color to your colors, you can get the most incredible, darker, more muted version of those colors. So long gone are the days, friends, where you need to mix black or brown into a color to tone it down. Have I blown your mind? I really hope I have. Remember I told you years ago, a lemon and how I painted that lemon, it completely changed everything for me, because when I wanted to create a shadow on my lemon, instead of mixing in brown or black into the yellow, I mixed in a little purple, and it changed my creative life. And so, friends, if you feel like you might have just had an aha moment, I want you to hit the like button. That's what I call a boop. And also, friends, I want you to head into comments right now. If you had that aha moment, let's talk about why. What was that moment? Let us know. Let's get the conversation started. All right, let's look into 2 more colors in a little bit more depth with this concept. Make a big old puddle of yellow on the paper. Make sure it's a sizable puddle. I would say about 3 inches round, just to give you an idea. And friends, I want you to then dab a little bit of purple, just the smallest amount of purple, in with your clean brush into that yellow. And this time I do want you to mix. I want you to swirl, mix, blendy blend, push that color around on the page, even add in a little bit of water and really start to experience what happens when that purple mixes with the yellow. What you're gonna see as you slowly add the purple is you're gonna get a beautiful muted version of yellow. Now, if you were to add a whole bunch of purple all at once, you're gonna get something that probably looks like a brown, which isn't a bad thing, but the beauty of this process is slowly adding that color, that opposite color, to slowly create a muted version of the yellow in this case. All right, now we know green isn't a primary, but this whole idea works with whatever color you're using. So let's add a little bit of red to our green. Now, greens are traditionally a really sticky color for a lot of us. Making the most out of greens, mixing the most interesting greens can be difficult. This little technique is going to really blow up your greens in the best way possible. So mix in small amounts of red slowly and let it swoosh and swim around together and see what happens. Imagine mixing in a little bit of pink into your green, or let's get crazy and mix a little orange into our green. What could happen? Oh, so much good can happen. Now, maybe this isn't new for you. Maybe you're just sticking around to get to this lemon step-by-step painting we're about to do. I would love for you to head into comments and tell us your first experience with mixing colors and how you felt and what it was like for you. All right, here we go, friends. Starting today, I'm using a square piece of watercolor paper, my 1/2-inch dagger brush, but you can certainly use a lovely, about number 6 round brush is gonna work equally well. And I'm starting with my lemons, and I'm going in with just a nice 50-50 ratio of water to pigment on my brush. Use your favorite yellow. I've got a lot of yellows. I'm just using my favorite. I'm working in between the curved edge of my dagger brush and the pointed edge, depending on what point at the lemon I'm painting. At the tips of the lemon, you know, the lemon kind of has those little like more muted points, so to speak. I'm using the tip of my dagger brush. And when I'm in the belly of the lemon, that's a weird way to say it, but you know what I mean. I'm using the broadside or the curved edge of my dagger. And I'm just continuing along. This is my first layer of yellow. And as you can see, I have like 4 or 5 different yellows. So every time I go back to my palette, I am grabbing a different yellow. All right, at this point, you might be wondering, your brain might be trailing off to, Christy, how do you come up with these compositions? Like, do you figure it out ahead of time? Here's a quick little sketch on my iPad to show you what my thoughts were for this composition and how I kind of sketched it out before I began this painting. So there are times, yes, where I think about my composition ahead of time. Like today, I know that I want to do lemons, a few lemon blossoms, and some kumquat bunches. And this is how I worked it out. So do the same for yourself. Grab a scrap piece of paper, or if you have an iPad, an iPencil, go ahead at it and sketch a little something out just to get your head straight and a little more focused. All right, friends, I'm going right in with the tip of my brush, a little bit of purple on my brush, and I'm starting to add that purple in now, wet on wet, into my bright yellow. And you can immediately see the definition and shading and depth that I'm getting just by doing a little bit of that. Now, going in, working on my lemon blossoms. Friends, I'm just using a little bit of like a buff, which is like an ivory watercolor. This is my Daniel Smith set, so I do have buff titanium. If you don't have buff, just grab a touch of blue, mix in a little bit of water, and you're gonna have a nice neutral base to start your white flowers. I always start my white watercolor flowers with a little skosh of color, and whatever color it might be is gonna work, and you'll see why. Now I'm going in, curved edge of my dagger facing down, press, drag, and lift. I'm starting to radiate out some green leaves. Grab whatever green you like. Even grab 2 greens on the brush at the same time and start to do some press, drag, and lift. If you want a wider leaf, you're going to do 2 of those press, drag, and lifts side by side, mirrored, and you're going to get a wider leaf. Friends, every time you go back to that palette, grab a different green. And you know what? If you're feeling extra, get a little bit of red or pink on your brush along with that green and see what happens. Just like I did there, I'm dabbing in a little bit of Opera Rose right into that yellowish green, and oh, it's so good, don't you think? I often use this idea of I've laid down a green leaf, I've got a nice shape, it's still a little damp, I'll go in with a little pink or red just on the tip of my brush, and I start to define the edges, not around the entire edge of the leaf because that would look like an outline, but maybe the tip, maybe the one side, that nice graceful curve of the leaf, I will add a little bit of pink. And that creates such a lovely sense of depth without making it feel unnatural. I'm starting to think about the greens and what's surrounding my white lemon blossoms at this point. I can notch in between the white petals a few darker green leaves, or it could be berries, or it could be another lemon, but whatever I paint around the white blossoms is going to make the white blossoms pop more, right? Now, the star of the show in this painting, and this is another compositional conversation that I'm about to have with you, the star of this painting are the lemons, and then second are the leaves, and third are going to be these blossoms. So what I'm thinking already is these blossoms are not going to be terribly detailed. So I'm really focusing on my lemons and getting the shading with my complementary color mixing, and the same goes for my leaves. So if you see me kind of ignoring those white blossoms, now you know why. Because our compositions, honestly, friends, they're as much about what we actually pay attention to as they are about what we ignore. Because if we pay attention to everything in our composition equally, then what are we looking at? What will our eye go to? Where will the power of your composition be? All right, I'm going back into my lemons. Things are a little bit more dry now. They're still damp. So we're getting that lovely diffusion. Every time I lay down a little stroke of this lavender watercolor that I have, it starts to explode, but it's extremely slow. So you get a diffused moment from your brush. So if you create a line into the damp yellow with purple, that line is going to be softer and not as contrasty. And back I go to my darker purple because I continue to define the edges and the ends of those lemons, because those little ends of the lemons, the little dimples, are what really, for me, define the shape of a lemon. So I am paying a lot of attention to them. All right, I'm feeling the need to get into the centers of these lemon blossoms. So I'm taking that dark mix of colors that I had on my brush from not rinsing, and I'm adding a little dark to the center. Now these lemons look like they're floating, so it's time for me to take care of that. I'm gonna add a big old leaf right down the middle here, and yeah, look what happened. I have some major explosion of that green into my yellow. I'm gonna rinse my brush off, get it nice and clean, dab it on the paper towel, and then I'm gonna scoop or lift and push that green that interrupted my lemon back from whence it came. And there you go. I cleaned that little mess up right quick. All right, I'm continuing this big, bold green leaf. I'm not sure how I feel about it. I sketched it out earlier and it felt like a good idea. Let's see what happens. Now I'm working kind of tentatively because my lemon and all the leaves around this big leaf are still kind of damp. But in this style of modern loose watercolor, you do move quickly and you do bump into other things that are wet. If this makes you nervous though, grab a hairdryer, have it at your side at all times, and you can just give things a little dry as you work. And notice I'm dabbing in little touches of pink as I go. Adding in these touches of complementary colors when things are damp or still wet is where it's at, because you can do the blending on the page. And the thing I love about blending on the page, you know how I feel about mixing color. I don't really do it. I'm an anti-color mixer. I'm gonna link below a video so you can figure out what I mean by that. But friends, I love adding the color on the page and not thoroughly mixing the red and the pink together, for example, because look at the magic that happens when you let gravity and atmosphere do some of the mixing on the page for you. You get to see the personality of each color and then the magic that happens when they come together on their own. Okay, I'm feeling better about this composition. I'm okay with this big leaf coming right down the middle like a sword, and my lemons are also looking less like they want to take off and fly off the page. So I'm feeling good. I'm doing a little bit more greenery here on the right-hand side. Press and lift, descending size strokes for a little bit of a leaf swag or garland or vine, whatever you want to call it. Now I'm headed back into these lemons now with a clean brush, and what I'm doing is blending some of the strokes that I added with my purple earlier just to create a softer, more diffused look. I don't necessarily want these lemons to look realistic. If I did, I would keep going with this process of adding shading, adding muted purples and letting it mingle with the yellow and then letting it dry and repeating, and oh my gosh, that's a lot of words. But I'm not after a super realistic lemon. I'm after an impression of a lemon. So I'm gonna stop there and get into these kumquats, because when it comes to paintings and composition, there's nothing I love more than berries or little things like kumquats. They just add a little sass, a little spice, and they make everything just look more fun and interesting and exciting. So just a bunch of orange ovals is essentially where it's at, and I'm mostly using the tip of my dagger brush to accomplish these little ovals. Now each oval has its own personality, because remember, some of these kumquats are going to be viewed from the side, and you might think, well, aren't they going to look always the same, whether it's from the side or not? You'd be surprised. Some of them are going to be more smushed, and they're going to have a different shape from a different angle. So keep that in mind as you're adding bunches of these kumquats. Now, very soon here, guess what color I'm going to be adding to create some shadow? You guessed it. I'm going to be adding a skosh of blue. And just like the lemon, those ends, the little dimples, are really going to help define the shape of each kumquat. Okay, friends, it's time for a boop. If you feel like my word salad creative craziness today deserves a like, I would ask you to hit that button right now. And friends, I also want to hear, are you going to try this? Are you feeling a little overwhelmed? What questions do you have for me? Maybe you're painting along, maybe you're watching this after the fact and you're stuck on something. I want to hear about it. Get into comments. I still reply to every single comment. It may take me a week, but I get there. Now, friends, if you're after a more realistic look, you can totally accomplish this. You can keep going, keep layering, dry in between though. The key to developing a more realistic finish with your paintings is glazing. And glazing is essentially what we're doing here, but letting the layers dry in between and continuing to add more layers little by little by little in between drying each layer. And by doing that, you're going to build up more realistic ideas, more realistic sense of shading and shadow and dimension. Let me know though, friends, would you like to see a more realistic Christie style painting? Hit up comments and say yes to realism or nah, just keep doing what you're doing, friend. All right, to further bring together this composition, it's time for some branches, because everything now kind of feels like it's floating, and I think a branch is going to help. So I'm starting at the top, a little bit of brown and whatever's left on my brush, because I really haven't rinsed it all that well in a while. And I'm going to start to connect areas of this branchy, bunchy composition with a little suggestion of a branch. For me, the key to creating a more realistic, convincing branch is just to make sure that it's not too straight. Branches have twists and turns and knots. You get the idea. And of course, take a moment, breathe, step back, figure out where you might want to add a few more leaves at this point. And friends, I'm getting more bold as the painting evolves. And what do I mean by that? I'm grabbing some really dark green right out of my palette. Now, maybe you don't have a palette as large as mine, so at this point, if you wanted to get more bold, mix a lot of red into a green, and you're gonna have a nice dark green. And get in there and really bump up the contrast quickly by adding some very decisive marks in between your white flowers, in between your kumquats, where your lemons meet some of the previous greenery that you added. Get some really nice dark contrasting leaves in there, and you're gonna start to see things really pop. I'm headed back into my lemons with my light lavender purple, and I'm continuing. This is a Christie version of glazing. I am adding a third layer. I think that's about what we're at, the third layer. I'm suggesting a little bit of that dappled, dimpled surface that a lemon has, but I'm not going overboard with it because it could start to look like your lemon has a polka dot disease, if you know what I mean. What's a polka dot disease? Oh my gosh. This is going to be one of the final layers on my lemons, so I'm really going from underneath on each one and adding a really decided yet sheer layer of my soft purple, and you're starting to see that underside shading really define and give dimension and depth to those lemons. My brush at this point is pretty dry, so it's not quite a dry brush technique where I'm creating a ton of texture, but I normally work with a pretty wet brush, and right now that brush is not so wet. All right, time to get the liner brush out because I do want to add a little bit of detail to these lemon blossoms, and I'm just using a little bit of honestly what was ever on the brush when I started, because y'all know by this point, and maybe you don't, but I'm not too precious about my brushes, and I kind of like to paint with the mess and the mud that is left on a brush from a previous painting session. And yeah, I really hope you don't unsubscribe at this point. Please don't go. But I'll tell you what, for white flowers, a little bit of sheer muddy color on your brush makes for some beautiful linear detail color. This is a great point in your painting to stand up, friends. Stand up, take a breath, and look at your painting from a different vantage point if you've been sitting this whole time, and I'm guessing you have. Maybe you've been working on an easel, but whatever the case may be, get back at a distance from your painting. It is so beneficial because for the most part, you're not going to be, or anyone that views your artwork is going to be viewing it from a couple feet away, or at least a foot or two away. So you need to get a sense of what things are looking like from that vantage. And then you can make some final decisions about what to do next. And I'll tell you what, usually 9 times out of 10, when I step back from my painting, I like it even more. You are ready now, my dear friends, to be brave and bold with color. If you made it all the way through to this point and didn't run away because I'm a little bit of a weirdo, then you need to go ahead and watch a few of these next because it's all about creative bravery hacks. That's right, little tricks that you can use in your painting to make sure that you are a fear-bashing, beautiful painter. And I know you are. So go get it and happy painting, friends.